process of internal control, which builds up from the point the transaction is captured at source till it gets to the DNA, that is the GL, the P&L and the balance sheet, that process has a robust framework which gives a reasonable assurance to the integrity of the financial statements. And that has to be probed by continuously challenging that process. So it's a question of asking the right questions. But perhaps Alok, you would like to add to that.
No, I would completely agree with you. On the one side is the legal accountability of a director. And I think as far as the legal role goes, there's not too much difference between Sri Lanka or in India or a UK. Similar laws, actually. So therefore, under company law, in most countries, all directors have a certain legal responsibility which they're supposed to discharge. And to that extent, they are expected to ensure that their oversight of the company's affairs falls within that framework of their legal responsibility. As a part of that, of course, equally, they are expected to participate in the board discussions and the meetings, ask all the right questions, seek all the right information, and as a part of that process, be able to take a decision which is in the best interests of the company, the shareholders, and all the stakeholders. Now, having said that, I think where you are coming from really is that, is there a way by which this can become so robust, so strong, that nothing goes wrong? On that, the answer is, well, nothing can ever be that strong and so robust, because at the end of it, if things have a way of going wrong, and between intentions and somebody trying to subvert something else, these things happen. And at the end of it, a good director has to play a certain role, play it well, and if he does so, the reasonable expectation is that the company's affairs will be managed well.
We have a couple of final observations from Greg.
Just to follow up on a point that Sanjay and others have raised about the correctness of information. It is our view that there is often erroneous reporting, intentional and unintentional, about the true quality of loan portfolios within an institution externally. So one of our suggestions is, and particularly if I was an investor, I might think about this, is to do some independent portfolio testing. And there are some tools out there today. Maybe we should start doing that much more often, particularly given the scale of things now perhaps justifies that kind of significant investment. Just a final comment on the governance. We've talked a lot about big and small MFIs. When I look across Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, I don't know quite the numbers in Sri Lanka, Nepal, we're seeing 80%, 70, 80% of the market is met or being reached by the top 5 or 6 or 7 institutions. So, really are we talking about the governance of every single institution, that even though they have a relatively small share in the market, or should we really be focusing our efforts on being sure that those big players at the market level, really that those are the institutions where corporate governance, because those are the ones that are going to have the biggest impact on the outcomes across the whole market. So let me just, final thought on corporate governance.
Nimal, any thoughts, final comments?
I would still take the liberty to sort of put this to Greg. Going back to the comment I made with regard to how do you really define governance, and what would you regard as in a larger societal framework, what would governance be seeking to achieve? Is it only about protecting the interests of shareholders, or does it go beyond that? And that, I would say, also more specifically in the context of microfinance.
Well, I think just to use an example from my own country in the U.S., we have corporate governance standards, Sarbanes-Oxley, which extends well beyond your responsibility only to your shareholders. You have a much wider responsibility to society, and I would endorse that. I think any institution that is operating in the microfinance market has a responsibility to their shareholders, but I think it's also privileged to be participating in a much wider economy, and it's part of society, and it also has obligations to the wider society. Although I agree it's very hard to define and institutionalize some of those checks and balances.
In that framework, how important would you regard as the role of whistleblowing?
I think it's probably a good idea to have substantial whistleblowing protections, but I'm not an expert on whistleblowing.
Okay, on that happy note.
With those concluding comments, let me first of all thank the three speakers for their interesting comments and presentations, and also for the audience for your interactive and interesting questions. It has been a privilege to chair this session. And let me now hand over the session to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you all for an excellent discussion. I'm going to invite FTC Executive Director Craig Wilson on stage to present presents and gifts to each of the speakers. Thank you, everyone, and I'm sure this conversation will continue as we get out into the tea room. This actually concludes the plenaries for today. Our first concurrent sessions will start after the break. They will happen again in here. This room will magically transform while we're outside. For those interested in the local industry, we're going to be looking at a Sri Lanka special session, which will be in this room here. To the side of us, we'll have a session on transaction and portfolio risk management, and then social performance management as well.